We're all owned by the syndicate, body and soul. Or should I just say body?
Hello, filthy movie lovers, something weirdos, and anti-criterion bros, to the 15th episode of The Sin Syndicate, the only podcast that knows A stands for available and always remembers to check the dial pack pill dispenser for saccharin tablets. My name is Gentry Austin, writer and researcher, and I'm here with my co-host, adult film historian Casey Scott. In today's episode, we have a very special guest direct from the Horse Ranch, screenwriter and professor of creative media and film at Northern Arizona University, Jonna Jones. She recently penned a screenplay loosely based on the life of the actress and scriptwriter for the movie we're looking at today, director Herschel Gordon Lewis's birth control exploitation picture, The Girl, the Body, and the Pill.
It's Randy. I go here. It's a swinging school. If you're looking for action, come on inside. There's his class scene. This is Miss Barrington, the teacher. You might say that Miss Barrington has ideas that are, kind of advanced. Maybe they are for her, but not for us. Heck, we do this between classes. Anyway, Miss Barrington started holding classes for the kids at her home. And some of the parents, they didn't like what she was teaching. Know why? She was teaching us girls about the pill. The joke's on her. We already know about it.
It's a story taken right out of today's headlines. A story important as life itself. The girl, the body, and the pill. A tremendous social revolution is taking place right under our noses. Here, for the first time, is the story of that change. Oh, don't let the size of that little pill fool you. It's like a hydrogen bomb exploding in the face of civilization. See it here, the motion picture crashing out of today's headlines. The girl, the body, and the pill.
Well, yeah, if you know folk, you might learn something. Whoops, 10 o'clock. I better get going. Not to class. To the water fountain. It's time for my pill.
First of all, I would like to say, as you know, that Louise Bunny Alma recently passed away.
Yeah.
She lived in the outskirts of Chicago, and it was a kind of a quick death. She had cancer. And I know this because through this research, I've met her second cousin who's interested in like genealogy, family tree stuff. And we connected. And so that's very sad that she died. She was actually raising her grandchildren, or I believe 2 grandchildren. And because her daughter had passed away. And so it's kind of unfortunate circumstances. All of that leading up to, she is a mystery, and she remained a mystery till the very end. Her second cousin recently met with her, and she brought her birth certificate to their meeting, and she doctored the birth certificate. It was very clear that she had done that. So that leads me back to the research. It was hard to do because she had many names, and she often, for whatever reason, obscured her, her past. So that research was complicated. In the article that you read in the Rialto report, I always wanted to dignify her, and I call her Louise because that was the name she used in the Detroit Free Press article. And I had a dog that I love very much named Louise. So I'll just stick with Louise. But I think Alma is the name that she was using as she was older, but sometimes Bunny. So anyway, you can see already it's very confusing.
Well, yeah, just give us a little bit of a background about how you started to research Louise.
Yeah, so I am a professor, and I write about things around film, but lots of different ways of approaching it, and not just film, cities and stuff too. But I had written a book about movie theaters, old theaters in the South, actually. And then I'd written a book about Detroit, a sculptor in Detroit. And so I thought, oh, wouldn't that be interesting to write a book about theaters in Detroit and kind of combine my two interests? And I found this article in the Detroit Free Press, which is a great newspaper from the 60s. And it was like, I can't remember the title of the article, but it was focused on the Fox Theater, which I've written about Fox Theater in Atlanta. But it was about like teen counselor writes dirty movies, essentially, was the name of the article. And that really captured my attention. And I read it and I saw immediately this tension between her and Herschel Gordon Lewis. Is that his name? I always get it wrong. Yeah. Okay. And that, you know, she was trying to do something sort of serious and he was discounting that. I immediately abandoned the book about theaters in Detroit, and I just had to find out more about what was going on because she was so sincere and he was so cynical. Yeah. And so I'm like, nope, I'm not writing that book. I've written a book about theaters. I don't need to write another one, and just set on my way to figure out what was going on here.
Charlie, do you love me?
Sure, babe. Sure I do. Come here, I'll show you.
Oh, love me, Charlie, love me. Yes, that's right. Yes.
So she was raised in Miami. Her father left early. She was raised by her mother. I think Miami had a huge influence on her. She was pretty, blonde, but not a gorgeous blonde, you know. So
beauty pageants, right?
She was, but I don't think she won to
win it. Yeah.
And she was a model, but she created the modeling agency. Yeah. You know, so as a young woman, which shows great ambition. And so she was making it. So anyway, in high school, she was, a good student. She was like she did public speaking and stuff like that, you know, and she was just making it work in kind of the small town that Miami was at the time, you know. So she was in the newspaper kind of a lot. Like she liked the press, you know, she figured out early she liked the press. So that helped my research a lot. But it was complicated by the fact that she had all these names, that she very early on last names, first names, there was a mixture of many names, which I just find fascinating. I think it's interesting when a person just changes their first name once, much less
that's
many times.
Yeah, like in our exploitation research, people use multiple names all the time. So we're always chasing leads and trying to figure out who these people are, all these pseudonyms. Right. It becomes, complicated for sure. So we know what she went through.
So anyway, and then she went to college in Miami and was a pretty good student. She said that she graduated, but she didn't. And then she, got married early from college, sweetheart, and then left that marriage and then got married again. And this is all for probably 24 or something like that. And then she fell in love with this, I think he's Hungarian, like the Hugh Hefner of Miami. And he was a sculptor, but I think he just had a lot of money. And she, in this newspaper articles, like, I, flipped for this guy. That ended her second marriage. And of course, he moved on. So I do not believe I'm not sure that she ever married again.
Okay.
And I know that there are those rumors that they were Herschel Gordon Lewis and she were married, but they were never married.
Okay.
And I think their relationship was pretty strained. And I don't think they ever talked to each other again after they worked together. And after, like when it was clear that the business was falling apart, she packed up and left Miami and moved to Chicago area.
Okay.
And then that was it in terms of and she never wanted to talk about this period, which leads to her obscurity, right? When you're not willing to talk about it. And I would just say that I find that so unfortunate because she did so much. She was a creative, smart, driven, ambitious young woman, making it work. And, I'm sure she would rather have been in Hollywood, but she wasn't. Mm-hmm. So, and it wasn't so easy to just buzz over to LA at the time, especially when you didn't have a lot of money.
Well, it sounds
or
like
connections.
She had a lot of connections in Miami through her modeling agency, right?
Yeah. Well, and growing up there too. And going to college there and being a pretty gregarious person. I think she just set out to make some of that happen.
I seen some of Randy's notes and it sure looks like she's learning things.
What things?
Things. Sex.
Well, I'm curious, you'd said you'd talked to her niece at some point. Yeah.
Like her second cousin, yeah.
Okay. And Louise, like you said, doesn't want to talk about this time. Why do you think that is? I mean, do you think she's embarrassed or do you think it's just like a sore spot emotionally for her with regard to Herschel?
I think it's probably a combination of things, and I think I tried to get the Rialto Report piece in her hands, and there's a documentary filmmaker in Texas who wanted to make a documentary about her, and he wanted me to help, and I'm like, that's never going to happen, which is not like me to just say, no, that's not going to work.
Well, you've been down that road. You've tried already.
Yeah.
You would know, right?
Yeah. And especially to get her on camera at this time in her life, So I think that she was embarrassed by it, though I don't think there's anything at all to be embarrassed by what she did.
It's all rather tame, wouldn't you say?
It's absolutely tame. And I can see the effort that she was putting into some of these, films she was always butting up against his wishes to keep it cheap, sexy, and shocking, which is the name of my screenplay about this, about Louise. And it's, well, we can talk about that later, but it's like she's wanting, and even in that first newspaper article I read, I could see that she's wanting to, talk about relevant things, and he just doesn't want to go there. He doesn't want any, she wanted to make documentaries is what she really wanted to do. And he wanted to make lurid stuff. And that is absolutely his right to do, And so she always had to work within those constraints. So I think there was a lot of, I think he needed her. I think she needed him. But I think it didn't obviously end well. I don't know exactly. Well, I think he just like kind of packed up the business at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that might have been because she said, I've had enough, and she had kids. I think she adopted these kids. So, she was probably looking at these little kids and saying, I can't do this with this new lifestyle that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that does tie back into your script that you kind of are able to rewrite her ending in your script. Tell me about that, where she goes on to become a documentary filmmaker.
She does. I don't know if you guys know Shirley Clark. She
love Shirley Clark. Yes, Portrait of Jason. Yeah.
Well, and that that's great. Yeah. So Wendy, Shirley's daughter, is a friend of mine, and so
great.
So I kind of turned Louise into Shirley Clark, and actually she's kind of filming the Portrait of Jason at the end of the script.
Wow. I love that. That is the ending I would want for her. That's amazing.
Yeah. I say it's loosely based on, so that I can, the end of that story, moving to, Chicago suburb, and raising kids and kind of living in obscurity is not the greatest ending for a script. So to give her what she wants, what she ultimately wants, and to give her the power to leave Miami and start again in 1960s New York City, and the Hungarian sculptor Playboy plays a part in the script. And he ultimately comes to New York and sees her, but he's pregnant with Steve Stone, the Herschel Gordon Lewis character's assistant. He's and gotten married. So she, walks into her house in Greenwich Village, having just seen him and his pregnant wife, and just kind of laughing, and walks into the house, and that's the end of it. So I like it a lot. And I love, cause I'm a researcher and a writer, I love putting that research into the script. So a lot of it is, truthful, but then and a lot of it is that tension between the two of them and their creative differences.
You don't understand, Brad. These kids have a right to know about sex and the precautions to take in case they lose control. With all of this sex play on TV and in the movies, I feel that it's more important than ever that they know about sex.
It's doing pretty well. It's won a lot of awards, and I'm looking for, I'm hoping to find somebody that wants to produce it. I think it's pretty doable, but those time periods, it's expensive to do the 1960s Miami part. So,
but I mean, that's the hook, right? That's what is going to make it really pop off the screen, is that setting.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah. Who's your dream to play Louise?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know. Do you have any ideas? Maybe that's my problem. I haven't thought of that.
Maybe we don't watch as much new movies to really speak on who the hot young actresses are.
I kind of do. I mean, Sydney Sweeney's very hot right now, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of the ages that would be covering over that time. Sydney Sweeney might be good.
Yeah. She's not quite like icy enough, blonde kind of thing. But that's what I need to do, is start picturing that in my head so that I can manifest it better than because it's a pretty good script, and I think it would be fun for people to play those characters too.
Yeah.
So,
and even though it's like loosely based around Louise, I think a lot of people, even outside, researchers watchers of sexploitation, they know Herschel Gordon Lewis. So, obviously it's loosely based around his life as well.
Yeah. Yeah. He doesn't come off too well. When I was talking to the Rialto Report people, I'm, and he's like, oh, well, actually, he was a friend of mine. I'm like, oh, sorry.
I'm not sure about that, but yeah. Who was really friends with Herschel? I think Herschel had a public persona and that he didn't really let a lot of people in,
Yeah.
Well, that relationship between them, like you said, it's a big part of your script. And I do think it is interesting because, you've come across a few articles where they're interviewed together. But, yeah, their relationship was very strange because Herschel was just a businessman. And clearly Louise wanted to do something a little bit more serious, right?
Absolutely. I'm always interested in people who have to work within I guess we all do, constraints, and how do you do creative work within these confines? And I think that that's why I admire her so much. I call them different movies in the script. She Devils on Wheels, that's what it's called. Sorry, I write so much. Okay. And so, just that is the most interesting film, and The Girl, the Body, and the Pill. And you'd asked a question about what other movies were dealing with the pill. And that's such an interesting question because I was so focused on the abortion part. I didn't even think really about the pill part because I was so taken aback by that scene of the abortion stuff on screen and how innovative and brutal it was. And that was, and I say this both in the script and in the article, women would either have the baby or kill themselves. Those were the options on film.
Hey, what's the matter? Who was that lady I saw going out? Are you sick?
Annie. I'm not mad anymore.
What is it? What's wrong?
That definitely was not Herschel's idea, That was just incredibly innovative. And then, but the pill part too, there were just, it's a British comedy. I think it's called Prudence and the Pill.
Right.
And so that's but it doesn't carry the heavy.
Right.
This is really about sex education in so many ways. I mean, there was all the rape of the teacher and all of those, Herschel influences. But if you took all of his out, it's a very serious film about, and she was a counselor and she was very committed to young people and she was trying to educate, and there was a lot of education in that very odd film.
Yeah, you could tell the teacher is basically speaking Louise's words.
Absolutely.
If she gives her speeches, you can totally tell that that's Louise putting herself in this character completely.
Mr. Price, you're an educated man, the principal of this high school. Well, surely you realize the enormous number of young people whose lives are ruined because they don't know how to protect themselves against their natural emotions and desires. How many girls do you know that have to drop out of school every year because of unwanted pregnancies? Well, how many do you...
Miss Barrington, that's quite enough.
So tell me some stuff you guys know about that film.
Girl, the Body, and the Pill?
Yeah.
Well, Herschel was based out of Chicago. And I know that he met Louise, going down to shoot Nudie Cuties in Florida. And I just think it's interesting that she appeared in all these films with him and then for other directors like Barry Mahon. And I think she worked with Bunny Yeager as well. And then something happened where I read a newspaper article where she said she sold the script of Blood Feast to him, And that was, I think, was that the first script that she sold to him? And then that was the first of several. I mean, she just kept writing. But Girl, the Body, and the Pill, in terms of films in this genre discussing like the pill and sex education and abortion, by the 60s, it wasn't really happening that much. It was much more of a roadshow thing for exploitation films in like the 40s and the 50s, where I think the big one is Mom and Dad from 1945, where the focus of that is sex education in the schools. And it has scenes like the scenes with the parents who are just upset about the education, and they say, we can teach that at home, and then they don't. It really feels like
it's an update on those.
It's an update on those. Like 20 years later, now the pill is introduced to sex education. Before that, it was educating women about childbirth to kind of scare them out of that, out of premarital sex. And then for the boys, it was scaring them about venereal disease. So it was kind of a form of abstinence education, but also it was like, if we're going to do this, be aware of the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this film, it's similar to that, except it feels for me much more sex negative than those films, just because it has the assault scene.
I think that's Herschel's influence a bit. Like
it might be.
There's that, even in the trailer for A Girl, Body, and the Pill, and you hear it in the movie, you know, they refer to the pill as like an atom bomb on the sex lives of teenagers. Like, I don't feel like Louise wouldn't refer to it like that, you know, that sounds so negative. Like, I don't know.
No, I agree. I think she was a firm believer in the pill, you know, because she had a lot of exposure to teenagers. And that's the thing. I identify with her in so many ways, because as a writer and kind of just like, and not driven, you know, writing wise, and this kind of, and her relationship with young people. I've always had a very close identify, maybe because I'm immature, identification with young people, and can really speak to them, hear them actually more than speak to them, I think, you know, is the key to young people. A lot of people can't hear them or don't want to. Yeah, so I see so many good things in there. And in Cheap, Sexy, and Shocking, they have it's in Miami, but they have this interview with a, you know, reporter afterwards, and she's trying to speak to these issues, and he's like, yeah, and there was a lot of blood, you know, and there was a lot of blood. So, you know, and then afterwards he's like, girl, the reporter's like, you got to get out of here. I don't ever want to interview you again, you know, and she's like, what are you saying? He's like, you need to get out of Miami, you know. In the script,
something I think about with Herschel is, and that I keep forgetting, is that he came from an advertising background, so he was always about the sell.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he reminds me, this relationship actually reminds me of later in adult films. There was a filmmaker named Howard Winters, and he connected with a writer and a composer named Ann Wolfe, and so. He came from advertising, and he was about the ad campaigns for the movies. And while Anne was the creative force in the films, she wrote the scripts, she wrote song music for the films. You know, she put a lot of herself into these films, and they were for adult films. They were for X-rated films. So in these scripts, there's so much interesting artistic stuff, and it's all her. When they split, it was a very bad split. So bad that, you know, when I interviewed Howard, he said, I promised Anne that I would never let anyone talk to her again out of her, you know, sort of like Louise, where it's like, I don't want to talk about this stuff because of that relationship split. And also, I think in their case, there was a romantic element to it. So the parallels between these two partnerships are so vivid when you think about the backgrounds of all four people involved. And it seems like a recurring thing in the film world, where there's some guy who's focusing on the promotion and the advertising and how to get butts and seats. And then you have a woman usually behind him, not alongside him, who is the creative force and who's the one who's trying to make it a little more than just cheap, tawdry stuff. The one example I can think of where they are side by side is there's a filmmaker named Joe Sarno in New York. And there was an actress named Peggy Steffens who was an actress in his films first, and then they got married. And then she became an associate producer with him, a production manager, and they worked side by side. And Joe was always, when he did interviews, he would say, you need to talk to Peggy about that. Peggy knows. It was a real collaborative, but that is such a rarity in this industry, to have a man and a woman working together creatively, that when it happens, it's special. And I think about what maybe would have happened if Herschel and Louise had been more on if Herschel had seen her on a more equal playing field. I think that's what I take away from when he does mention her, that there's no equality there.
He's pretty dismissive.
Yeah. And and I think even people who work with him, there are other people who are also just kind of like, well, yeah, she was there and she was around. And it's kind of like, well, you don't get an assistant director credit by just hanging around, or a production manager credit, or like working on costumes. And those are integral parts of the filmmaking process. And you don't, if she wasn't that important, he probably wouldn't have put her name on the movie.
That's something I always wondered with Herschel, why he was so dismissive. Was it just because these didn't make money? That's kind of what I want to think. That he was just like, he's so business oriented. He was upset that they didn't make money. But like you said, we don't know if there was some personal thing there too as well, where, like you said in some of these later interviews, he's barely even mentions her. Like you said, she's an assistant director credit on this film. Jonna, do you know how much she did, like, behind the scenes? Are these credits, something that we should take at face value?
I think the only reason not to take them at face value is that they're probably not enough. Okay. That she was probably doing even more than that. So, She Devils on Wheels, that to me is one of the most interesting films because, first of all, that was a real woman bike gang or whatever you call them. And, she found them. And to get them to go along and to do this. And I mean, one of the interesting things, and I talk about it in the article, the first 21 minutes, there's not one man in the film. And there's no way that was anybody else's idea but hers. And just for her to find them and to get them to work collaboratively, to allow, there's a real documentary feel and part of that. And that, I think, was her impulse, was to document. And so in my screenplay, Joe Boy ends up getting decapitated while he's riding his motorcycle by a wire, and he
in the movie,
and like in the movie, and that Louise in the script didn't want that to happen because that was just, and she's like having to make the paper mache head, and she's like got tears that are running down onto the paper mache head that's making it cry too,
Wow. Okay, that's good. I love that touch.
Did you find something regarding Louise like doing some makeup and blood effects?
Yeah, there was an article where she talks about how she created the blood effects, and she created like this formula that led to. So basically, in a sense, she created gore in American cinema. Like, we have her to thank, whether you like it or not, for the original, blood formula that was in Blood Feast and led to countless other films using similar formulas.
Also, Herschel, we always call him the Godfather of Gore. Maybe we should change it up. Now it's the goddess of gore. Louise
Goddess of Gore sounds good. I like it.
Need an alternate title for your script. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, backing up a bit, do you know how exactly Herschel and Louise met in Miami? Was it through just her? She was already working on Nudie Cuties and maybe just ran into Bunny Yeager and Barry and Herschel?
I think it was Barry. I think it was through Barry. And I think she was on, I believe she was on set of one of the ones in the nudist colonies. And so I was, it's like I kind of imagine that he kind of just stole her away, and I'm interested too at her. I mean, I like the Nudie Cuties, and she was pretty and she looked nice and on screen. And, she gave that up. I mean, I think she could have still keep doing that. But I think, again, her ambition drove her to want more than that, to be, you can, from beauty pageant to model to actress. I think that's a pretty normal course for women who are interested in that course. But then to quickly realize that was, she was more driven and wanted that, she had that creative impulse.
Yeah, I was looking at her credits again, and the last time she ever acted was in '68. Yeah, on Suburban Roulette with Herschel.
Yeah.
That's it.
Didn't she work on the 70s movies in the background, though? I think isn't she credited as like assistant director on Gore Girls? I think she was with him until basically the end.
72-ish, yeah. So a couple more years, yeah.
Yeah.
But acting-wise, I think it was just,
that was it.
Yeah, it was it.
Say, where'd you learn so much about birth control anyway?
Certainly not from you.
Yeah, you can say that again. Have a carrot.
What area, if you said, Jana, we're going to give you an assignment and we want you to, I'm actually on sabbatical for the next year. So I have some time. Yeah, I know.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Movie in production.
Yeah, I'll do that, but I can do more than that. So is there a place where you see where you kind of get my head now? Like what research, is there anything similar to Louise or in that vein that needs more investigation? I'm not really interested in any kind of hardcore stuff because I have to watch them.
Right.
So, and I have to watch them like on my laptop that's university owned. So
completely understand. Yeah.
So do you see any places that you'd like, something like along the Louise?
I mean, I feel like that whole area around Miami was really interesting. There was a lot going on. I know there has been some writing as well about Manuel Conde, filmmaker in that area. Casey, what do you think?
Well, I immediately, she used the name Bunny. I immediately go to the other Bunny Yeager. There was a really good documentary that came out about her recently. And I forget what it was called. I'll let you know what it was. But I feel like it was just scratching the surface of that. And she was someone who also was a model who then went into photography, casting, directing. Her work is still kind of not talked about as much. But I think Louise is an interesting case because she's someone who we don't know enough about. My thing is that with all of the research that you've done, I don't know if you feel like you're just going to keep running into more like roadblocks or things where you're trying to find. Then I run into that all the time where I'm trying to find stuff and it's like there just aren't any answers because lack of documentation, people aren't around anymore, that kind of thing. So I'm so glad you wrote a script, inspired by her. I've seen her name on all of these films. And I've always thought it very strange that there isn't more known about her because she was such an important figure. So the fact that you focused on her and were able to open this door and let people know about this important figure in this industry, I think is major. It is just one of those things where like for every answer, there's going to be additional questions.
Yeah.
And the challenge is, when do I realize there are no answers to the questions and move on to the next question that I could possibly get answers to?
I like the Bunny Yeager idea.
Yeah.
And in researching Bunny Yeager, you might come up with something on Louise as well, and they might connect somehow.
True.
That's interesting.
More. As far as exploitation, like, God, it's such a wide net, you know? I mean, I guess another thing I would say is like the Chicago, you know, you've done a lot of research on movie theaters, like you focus on the Chicago exploitation film market or something like that.
I'm interested in, you know, like kind of how women of this, you know, like Louise, you know, use their agency in an industry that has no agency for women.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That is really curious to me.
My old lady, my mother says it's outrageous, but then everything's outrageous to her. She's just jealous because I'm learning things.
Hey, Randy, I thought you knew it all.
That's enough, Mike. I'll see you after class.
All right.
Let me ask you, John, speaking of women, did you come up on anything in your research about the actress in this, Nancy Lee Noble, the little redheaded girl?
I didn't. Do you know?
Casey, did you?
I do. Yes, I do. Yeah. I found her a couple years ago, randomly looking for her. And I researched her and emailed her. And she was a stage actress in Chicago and kind of, you know, answered a casting call for this movie, and then followed Herschel back to Florida to do She Devils on Wheels. And just for the hell of it, she was offered 2 stage plays that weren't paying in Chicago at the same time that she would be shooting these movies, and the plays weren't going to pay. So she followed Herschel back to Florida to make these movies.
Right there, yeah.
She's, I think, my favorite actress from any of these movies. She is also interesting in that she went out to California to continue acting, and she has small parts and other things like that. And then she met a man who is now her longtime partner, who was a blind from birth, championship runner, and they've been together since 1980. And so she is still with him and still living with him and very happy. So that is kind of like, you want happy. That's something that we come across with a lot of our research in these films, is that we want happy endings for everybody. That's the thing. And so when you hear a happy ending for someone like Nancy Lee Noble, you want it for everybody.
Well, maybe we should definitely reach out to Nancy, see what she has to say about working with Louise. Clearly, like, they were on set together. She was performing Louise's scripts. And
right, very interesting.
And if she was assistant director on both of those movies in Florida, then I think she would definitely remember, you know, a woman working with her on the set, which at that time in that genre, Barry Mahon's wife, Clell, worked with him a lot, but I don't think that frequently. That might be an area, actually, that you might want to look into, because Barry shot in Florida, and his wife is typically given credit as like script supervisor, but it's possible she was more involved than we know of. She's no longer with us, but Barry's children are. So that might be an area in terms of Florida exploitation where there is another woman working in these films that we just don't know anything about, because her husband is the guy whose name is on all these movies, but it's possible she was much more involved than we know of.
Very interesting. And the Chicago thing is interesting too. Chicago's just an interesting city. They certainly didn't have the nudist camps in Chicago.
No. No. I mean, the weather didn't stop Herschel from shooting a few nudie cuties in Chicago, but you can tell that it's Chicago.
Yeah.
It is not the suntans of Florida and California. It's very, very pale.
Yeah.
They're very, very Chicago.
The She Devils is in Miami.
That's Florida.
That
is for the hell of it, Florida.
It's fantastic, Miami, because they're racing their motorcycles on the beach, of which there's not one building on these beautiful Miami, you know. So that to me is so fascinating because Miami is such a different place now. But the Girls Body Themselves, boy, that is total Chicago, gray, brick, you know.
Suburban Roulette must have been Chicago too, right, Casey?
I think so, yeah.
It was, like a suburb of Chicago, maybe Evanston, maybe.
Maybe so, yeah. And that's a pretty different, that's a Louise that's, a role of the kind of seen it all, much different character for her than she was playing a few years earlier.
In Suburban Roulette?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she's definitely like the jaded housewife.
Very jaded.
And it could very well have been reflecting her worldview at that time.
Yeah.
Right. Because she, by 68 or I think it was shot 67, released in 68, but that's like several years into this business where it's this particular business. That's a lot of time. Like the time doubles when you're in an industry like this, right? It feels longer. So
a lot
I'm
of
sure
time
it was very seen it all. Yeah. Well, that's draining probably. I think a lot, and I was researching Herschel before this, and I was like, oh right, we have Herschel to blame for like junk mail.
Yeah.
Right.
For getting stuff in the mail that we don't want. Like he's responsible for that. So thanks.
Yeah. He made a whole business of it.
Again, if it would have stuck together, maybe that wouldn't have happened.
That's right.
Yeah. But I admire her for not doing that, because I think there is a thing where like there's situations where there are men that have issues and there's a thought, well, I can change him. And it's like, I think she knew, I'm not going to change him.
Yeah.
I need to do what's good for me. And I think it's interesting. They kind of switched places because he retired to Florida and then she moved to Chicago and he started in Chicago. So it's very interesting that they just switched places in like the early 70s.
Miss Barrington sure talks in circles. First she tells us how to prevent babies, and then she tells us not to do anything until we're married.
Yeah, she's corny. I just don't worry about it as long as I got those pills.
Hey, you still taking those pills? Where'd you get them?
From my ever-loving mother.
Is that right? Man, that's wild. Yeah, a guy can sure have his cake, and eat it too, with those pills.
Back to the pill. Casey, can you think of any other movies that were around this time that were doing anything with abortion or contraceptive?
Not really. I mean, there was a movie called The Pill, which was sort of a repurposing of a 40s movie called Test Tube Babies with some new footage shot in New York. But it's more of like a white coat fake documentary. Yeah. Anything narrative by that time wasn't really happening. I think that was a time when actually mainstream cinema was kind of going in this direction. I mean, you had stuff like Georgie Girl and Alfie in 66, where, they were doing it in England before they started doing it over here. I think there was they were a lot more daring in terms of that before Hollywood kind of realized, oh, maybe we can start pushing the envelope here with The Pill and sex education and things like that. I think it's tough to market this type of subject matter to audiences that are looking for like a sexy good time, because neither of those things are sexy good time.
No, nobody was leaving that movie and going, let's get it on.
No. Well, it's interesting to think about what a game changer The Pill was. And that's something I talked in the previous episodes about how, for me, I feel like it took a long time for me to kind of think that the sexual revolution really of the 60s was really for men. It wasn't necessarily for women. But then you had things like The Pill. You had things like Roe v. Wade, where it was, about empowering women to be able to have sex and not have to be punished for it. And they were able to pursue birth control. They were able to pursue safe abortions, the freedom of choice. That those just aren't sexy things. Those aren't as sexy as like a Playboy centerfold or like, things like that, where it's marketed completely to men. So the sexual revolution elements that were really important for women weren't exploitable in this genre because those films were aimed at men. So they're not going to find The Pill sexy. They're not going to find, safe and clean abortions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's why it's so important that this film was written by a woman. And it really, for most of the film, except for, that last sequence, it feels very feminist for a lot of that film.
It does.
Yeah. Which is that's why when you asked if there were any other films around that time, I was like, honestly, no. It's really kind of a really special anomaly. And I think it's accidentally is one of Herschel's better movies, I think specifically because of Louise's involvement.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, rewatching it again, I forgot there are 2 pretty brutal sexual assault scenes. I wonder, what this original script looks like before it gets in the hands of Herschel, who I'm sure is changing things.
I agree. I suspect that those were add-ons.
Yeah.
Because they don't even really make any sense.
Yeah, that last one where the teacher is tied up is just it's such a loose end. It kind of goes nowhere. It cuts off abruptly, and then we cut to them in a classroom. Oh, we caught him before anything happened. It's okay, yeah. Well, what just happened there?
Yeah,
very strange.
Something to put in the trailer to lure people to see the movie.
Yeah,
for sure. It's definitely a pull quote kind of thing where you can put it in the trailer.
I'd sure like a taste of that mouth, baby, but I can't risk it. All these weeks I've been listening to all that sex talk in them classes, and now I'm going to sample the teacher.
And this kind of all ties into with my theater research, because I wrote about picture palaces, the big 1920s picture palaces in southern cities, Atlanta, Tampa, Biloxi, Raleigh, Durham, Memphis, and Birmingham, and how these theaters in the 60s with white flight and suburbanization, that the theaters emptied out and the downtowns emptied out. And, they have 2,000 to 4,000 seats.
Yeah.
Because at the time they were built, there was no suburbs and no TV, and that was the thing to do. So by the 60s, they were falling apart. They're very hard to maintain because of their size. And it was I did interviews, and thankfully I actually started this on my PhD dissertation, and that was a while ago. And I was able to interview lots of these people before they died, and that I kind of keep doing that. I mean, with the Louise, I never got to interview her, but I keep capturing these things before they disappear. So these theaters, these films were so important to these theaters because the people who would go were interested in going to these exploitation movies didn't care about the rundown theaters. And that was just fine, for the kind of, environment that they were sort of looking for. And it was kind of loose and easy, and, they could get high and smoke and do all that stuff in these theaters. And, there was really nobody that was able to stop them. There might be an 80-year-old usher or whatever, but so it all really went well together. I mean, these films were
they kept some of those theaters alive. Yeah,
absolutely. It enabled these movies to have a place, So I love those kind of connections. And then as soon as the 70s preservation movement began, and when people really saw what was being lost and torn down to make parking lots and all that stuff, and then they, usually wealthy white people, worked very hard to bring these theaters back to life. And they did a good job. And they continue to be places for communities to meet. Though it's very rare to be able to, unless it's a concert, to fill the seats because they're just so big, So, and then those movies, they pretended those movies never were shown in those theaters. Now that never happened. So,
were you able to find any billboards that show a theatrical showing of The Pill in any of these theaters?
I did at the Tampa Theater.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and again, I wrote the book and stuff, and there's still people telling me get it. No, that was never. So, but
even with sources cited and everything, they're still denying.
Yeah, I'm like, no, that never happened. I'm like, oh, well, I guess you are living in this world right now where all facts are negated, right?
Right.
Unbelievable. So, so anyway, but that symbiotic relationship between exploitation films and those old theaters was super important for both.
What was the famous one on 42nd Street that had that ornate water fountain? Do you know the name of that, Casey?
Oh, gosh. I don't. It's not the top of my head.
Yeah.
I don't remember now.
I'll have to ask Alex, our friend Alex. He knows all about those movie theaters. Yeah, you know about 42nd Street that had some really fancy theaters that were turned into sexploitation.
Quote unquote grindhouses, right?
Grindhouses, yeah.
And where do you guys live?
I'm in
New York, so I should know.
And where are you?
I'm in Minnesota.
You are? Where in Minnesota?
South of St. Paul.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Yes.
It's not desert. It's
I've been through Flagstaff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's high altitude, 7,000.
You've got a ski slope there.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a great town. And I'm an equestrian, so it's a great place for horses. Yeah. So
I can imagine. Wow.
Young lady, this is not a legitimate prescription. I'm tired of you kids trying to finagle these pills from me. Get out of here before I call the police department and your family.
Well, before we go, Gianna, what's your favorite scene out of The Pill? Or just the most maybe it doesn't have to be your favorite, but maybe just the most important moment would be
well, I mean, it's brutal, but it literally reference to abortions, but nobody literally shows the aftermath on that couch with the plastic.
The plastic is such a good touch.
It is a good touch. And, a lot of people in that period did have plastic on their couches in their living room, bless their hearts. So just that, it's such a dark scene, but it's the perfect collaboration between Louise and Herschel because it's her really trying to make a statement. And it's him saying, more blood, more blood.
Putting the blood on the towel.
Right. Well, I just had one last question. Hopefully, just very quick. I know that you said that Louise didn't really want to talk about this period in her life. Do you think it was because she thought that people wanted to talk about her on-screen work? Or do you think that she would have been maybe more agreeable to talk about it in terms of her creative input into these films rather than just the on-screen stuff, if that was left off the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think she was aware that I was very interested in her creative work. So I think she got it in her head that none of it was any good. None of it was, for children, for her, for her legacy. It was something to be ashamed of. And I don't even think there's nothing in her on-screen work that's shameful either, And so it does bring me great sadness that she has died and that she died not knowing. Well, I think she knew that some people were very interested in celebrating her career, but I don't think she ever wrapped around her head why it was something worth celebrating. And so I will just, keep making it my mission, to, and Louise and hopefully some other women too, for an industry that's very difficult. But I would say there's lots of industry, and it's a very difficult industry, I think, probably to work in, but to be a woman in that industry and try to have some power in it is very difficult. But to be a woman and have some power in any industry continues as the world seems to be kind of turning backwards too, particularly for women. So this not only tells us about a period of time then, but also kind of reflects unfortunately, more contemporary times as well.
Yeah.
Here we are. So.
Well, I really appreciate you shining a light on Louise. She's still, like you said, such a mysterious figure. I was listening to, sometimes on those DVDs, they have the audio commentaries, and they had one with David Friedman, who produced a lot of Herschel's films. And when Louise came up on the screen, Mike Vraney, who was distributing some of these movies in the 90s and 2000s, he kind of asked him about Dave, like, yeah, what do you know about Bunny? And he was just like, there's 1,000 stories about Bunny. She was everything to everybody, which I thought was a really interesting thing for him to say. Like, even to Dave, I think who was relatively close with probably both of them, for sure Herschel, she was still a mystery even then.
Hey, man, I never knew she was so, stacked.
Yeah, neither did I.
Come to think of it, she must be a pretty hip broad to teach that stuff. She must really dig it to know so much about it.
So thanks again. And I'm really looking forward to that script, seeing where it goes. And we'll send you any suggestions we hear from our audience about who should play Louise. And I'll think about
good.
it. Yes. I'll think about it some more too.
We'll do
that sounds great. Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys, and you know a lot of stuff. And I always like people that know a lot of stuff. So that's good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you take care, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Casey, still there?
Yeah. Did you want to go over some of the other cast?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm excited about this script. I really am.
Yeah.
I'd
heard a little bit about it.
It kind of reminds me of the Notorious Betty Page when that came out. So in my mind, I'm thinking, and that was directed by a woman, starring Gretchen Mol.
Yeah,
I think it was also written by a woman. So like if we do something similar where it's about a woman who is also behind the scenes, I would love that. That would be great.
Well, Nancy Lee Noble, was there anything else you wanted to say about her?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two periods of her life that, there's actually kind of three. There's Chicago. I mean, Girl in the Body and the Pill was her first movie. And right out the gate, she's terrific. I think it's the general consensus among most Herschel Gordon Lewis fans that she is like the most memorable woman who appeared in these films. Like, she's good in all three of them. She doesn't have a lot to do in Just for the Hell of It, but she's still very memorable. And it's sort of like an extension of her part in this, where she's like a bad girl. And then you have Honey Pot, where she's in Three Devils on Wheels, where she's super cute on her little on her little trike. And I mean, I just think she's adorable. And then watching her in California films, like she's in Jackson County Jail for New World. And then I was watching this in my Super Vixens era. I went to watch Chesty Anderson USN because that's the only other movie Sherry Eubank made. So I'm watching this movie to see Sherry Eubank, who, spoiler alert, is not good in that movie. Bummer. Yeah, but Nancy Noble pops up randomly for like a joke punchline.
Did you add her to the IMDb?
Smile? I did not. She was, I combined Nancy Noble and Nancy Lee Noble. So all of those credits were combined because I combined Nancy Noble and Nancy Lee Noble because they were separate. This was a long time ago. But I said, oh my God, I got so excited. And that was the one thing I remember about that movie is Nancy Lee Noble in this really cute cutaway. And I'm like, oh my God, she made it to California. Like I got so excited. And I'm glad she's doing well now. I've reached out to her. Actually, I can read you the email that she sent me when I first reached out to her.
Yes.
Or just summary. Hi, Casey. Wow, I sure didn't know that I had any fans. So, she doesn't know that she has a fan base, which is wild. It was fun doing the two movies in Florida. At that time, I was offered 2 plays and I wouldn't get paid for either of them, or 2 movies in Miami and I would get paid. I was in Chicago, so Miami in the winter sounded good. I had to learn how to drive a Honda 50. I did not have a driver's license, and that was for She Devils on Wheels.
Yeah, I had heard from Herschel in his commentary. He said like she was the only one who didn't know how to ride a bike. The rest of them were like pros.
Right. Yeah, she is the one actress in that entire gang. But I think it's great that she made such an impression on him in that one movie that he was like, yeah, we're going to do these 2 movies back to back. Come down. And he didn't just bring her. He brought Ray Sager, who then became a huge part of the Herschel Gordon Lewis universe, and Steve White, who also was in Just for the Hell of It. And he was an alley tramp in Chicago before he went down to Florida. And he was also in Blast Off Girls. He's in the band that performs at the beginning of that movie. So he really came back with a lot of key people. Roy Collodi, who was the cinematographer on this and also is the rapist in this, was in She Devils on Wheels. He went down and was a crew member, and he passed away in I believe, the 80s back in Illinois because he didn't stay in Florida. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that he kind of collected these people and then went back to Florida just because he knew that they were good to work with. But I have reached back out to her. I'd love to see if we could make an interview happen because I would love to know what her thoughts are on all 3 of those movies, as well as if she remembers, Louise Downe.
Yeah, that'd be huge to hear her thoughts on Louise for sure.
Oh, Ray, we shouldn't have. What if I become pregnant? Oh, and if my father finds out?
Honey, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I guess I just got carried away.
Herschel was, I think for a lot of people, he was one of my first introductions to something weird.
Yeah.
And She Devils was the film that made me a fan for sure. And Nancy was a big part of that. She's just such a striking presence. She's so much fun. Her hair is a lovely shade of red and it pops off the screen. And I love that movie in no small part because of her.
Yeah. That was my first Herschel Gordon Lewis movie ever. I bought it on a really old VHS that was a pink clamshell. I don't remember which company it was, but that was my first one. I bought it at a Blockbuster going out of business sale. I bought that with, some other one that's worth a fortune now. I don't remember now. But that was the first one. And then Blood Feast was one of the first 3 DVDs I ever bought. It was that, Blood and Black Lace, and
something else
Beyond. It was 3 Bs. Those are the first 3 DVDs I ever bought.
That's funny. And when you met Dave Friedman, you were wearing your She Devils shirt, weren't you? One of the times.
I was, which does not fit me anymore, obviously, because I was just out of high school when I met Dave Friedman.
Cut the sleeves off. It'll work.
Yeah, no. I'd like to make it into like a pillowcase or something so I can still have it and use it for stuff. But yeah, I mean, she's great. Other people in this movie, I mean, I think one of the big ones is
Eleanor, that she's in Shanty Tramp.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So it's interesting because you have the 2 of the cast members from Taste of Blood and Shanty Tramp. They're in both. And they were shot in Florida and then they went up to Chicago. So that genesis is very interesting. So Bill Rogers, who plays the principal in this, who's, totally uptight. And that's something, I forgot to ask Jana was...
he's the dad.
Oh, the dad, right. He's not the principal. That's right. He... H.G. Lewis claimed that he wrote this role for him. And I was like, well, you didn't write the script. So do you mean Louise wrote the role for him? So, or I think he might have meant that he thought of him in the role immediately when he read it. But I don't know if Louise had him in mind when she wrote it. Bill Rogers has a really crazy history in exploitation movies in Florida. I mean, he was a theater actor and he started out dubbing movies for K. Gordon Murray. So a lot of the Mexican kid movies, Mexican horror movies, he was dubbing those. And on those sessions, he was working with future directors like Joe Prito, who did Shanty Tramp, and Raphael Remy, who did Miss Leslie's Dolls and some other films like that. He was in Love Goddesses of Blood Island. He designed the ad campaign for Sextet, but he was in Taste of Blood. That was he and Eleanor Vale were cast in that based on a production of The Fantastics that H.G. Lewis saw. So from that musical, they ended up in Taste of Blood. So then they were in Shanty Tramp after that. So Eleanor Vale, at the time she was in Shanty Tramp and I think Taste of Blood, she was a substitute school teacher. Okay. So Luckily, she didn't lose her job because of it. She instead fell in love with the man who played her father in Shanty Tramp, married him, and moved to Chicago. So she was already in Chicago for Girl, the Body, and the Pill. And Bill Rogers was flown from Florida to Chicago to shoot, which is kind of impressive because he didn't really bring a lot of people from Florida to Chicago. He did the reverse. But yeah, Bill Rogers, really interesting guy.
Yeah. I don't actually love his performance in this film. I think it's a little
very over the top.
But
yes, very over the top.
I can kind of see what Herschel would see in him for sure. It's it's intense, theatrical performance that, screams off the screen, which is kind of what he's going for. So
Please, try to understand. They're in love.
You miserable excuse for a woman. You tramp! You trapped me into this marriage by getting pregnant. You've ruined my life, and now you want to ruin your daughter's the same way. You're scum! I've hated you for 16 years, using yourself to trap me, and now you want your daughter to do the same thing!
I like Eleanor Vale better in it.
It's such
I like her in everything.
Yeah, because
it really is
very uptight in this one, like a cowardly mother, cowering beneath her husband, who's an overbearing presence. And then the Shanty Tramp, though, she's the complete opposite. She's like very in control of her sexual and life.
Well, Bill Rogers said that she was much more like the role in Roll the Body and the Pill than Shanty Tramp. He said that Shanty Tramp was a real challenge for her because she was not at all like that character at all. She was much more like her characters in Taste of Blood and Girl, the Body and the Pill. So that's why Shanty Tramp was such a revelation. It's like, oh my God, who is this woman? And then she really went to town for that performance.
Yeah, well, all props to her then. Yeah, because Shanty Tramp is a total transformation for sure.
Yeah, and I would love to see if I could get Charles Kilgore on to talk about that with us because that's one of his favorites. And I think he might have interviewed Eleanor Vale. I'm trying to remember if he told me that he did or not. But and then she was also the script supervisor on Blast Off Girls. So she kind of stayed in that realm with Herschel in Chicago because that was also shot in Chicago.
But yeah, Ray Sager.
Ray Sager is still very successful now in Canada. He gives Bunny Downe credit in his interview on the Arrow box set where they do an interview with him on the Wizard of Gore disc where he's kind of like, no, Bunny Downe was, came from this modeling background, but she was a writer and she was, on the set and she was really very involved with the Herschel film. So he gives her props in that interview, which I think is very important because as you mentioned, and we talked about, not a lot of people giving her props. I love that Dave did. Yeah, it's not that common.
Everything that I've read and heard from Dave and Herschel, it's kind of like an offhanded props, I should say. They're not like lifting her up. Like, we loved her script. She was so great. She did so much. No, it's like, she did this, but then movies didn't make money. Or she had crazy ideas. That was another thing that Friedman had said in that commentary. He's like, she had a lot of crazy ideas and Herschel went along with a couple of them. That's kind of what he said, which is interesting as well. Like,
I wonder what those ideas were.
Well, I think that stuff like this, stuff
that's not really that commercial. Right. If you're marketing it to a specific type of audience that they're much more familiar with. That's very true. Yeah, that's why it is. Yeah, that's why it is. Like, as we talked about, it is not your typical sexploitation or exploitation movie in either genre. It's not really something that people were doing in 1966, 67. It might have worked better as like an independent feature.
Yes, Alice.
Miss Barrington,
I think it's important that we receive these lectures, but my father says it's wrong and against the policy of the school. He told me that if I attend these classes, he'd make trouble with the school board. I don't know what to do.
Any other actors or actresses to talk about?
I don't think so. I mean, Roy Collodi, I think most people remember him as the bartender that gets roughed up in She Devils on Wheels, because he worked on that. He was in Alley Tramp. I always found him kind of attractive, but I don't remember. He's not Craig Maudsley Jr. That's still the hottest guy that was ever in any Herschel Gordon Lewis movie. He's Ajax in Scum of the Earth, and he was like an Adonis.
Okay.
which is, you never see that in these nudist camp movies. You never see any man who looks like, oh, good, I'm glad this man has no clothes on. It's usually guys like you guys. Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's hot to trot.
I just like the name Ajax, actually, as like, the guy.
Well, it reminds me of the cleaner. There's a cleaning thing, Ajax. Yeah.
In any of these movies where there's like a modeling agency where they're pushing girls to go like further than they want to, there's always this guy hanging in the corner off the side who they call in to like do stuff. The heavy. Like
the heavy. Exactly.
Or the, off-screen softcore stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Ajax is one of them. And in The Sinister Urge, there was that.
Yes.
That Hawaiian, I think he's Hawaiian. His last name sounds.
Yeah, I think so. I think we landed on that.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
He's kind of this prowling around character.
Yeah, but I'm glad that we chose. Yeah, because I think the choices between this were either Girl, The Body and the Pill, or She Devils on Wheels. I think this tracks more with what we focus on with this podcast, because it is kind of. It has elements of a sexploitation movie, even if it isn't sexy, and it kind of is marketed. The trailer, which is also hosted by Nancy Lee Noble and is super duper adorable.
Love it.
Love her. And, to detour a bit, we needed more Nancy Lee Noble movies. We really did. I wish she'd stuck around in Florida and done way more. Yeah, the trailer even kind of marketed, it's like, oh, this is like sexy, or like, ooh, this is like taboo. And so it is kind of marketing it as something taboo and sexual in nature, and it really isn't at all.
Like I said, when I was rewatching it, I mean, I thought it was kind of, I think you could categorize this as a roughie. I mean, there's that gang rape scene in the car, and then there's that scene at the end where the teacher's got like tape over her mouth and she's being assaulted and screaming. I mean, that's roughy to me.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely roughy elements into it. I wouldn't categorize it as a roughie.
Yeah, I mean, it's the goal like of the full-blown roughie, but
no. I mean, it definitely it shows that the direction that sex movies were going in at that point. But yeah, I wouldn't categorize it as a roughie. I think the only full-fledged roughie that H.G. Lewis did was Scum of the Earth, I believe. The movie doesn't feel like, it kind of reminds me of, in terms of like atmosphere and look, of Damaged Goods, the Sid Davis movie from 1961, which is not about abortion of the pill, but it's about venereal disease. And it's about like this bad girl that spreads venereal disease in this small town. And it is very that, where it has people who look too old to be high schoolers, who aren't getting good sex education. And so it results in, a VD outbreak. But that should tell you how kind of old-fashioned this is by 67 standards. That movie's 1961.
Right.
So, like 67, we weren't doing stuff like this. And then you have later The Hard Road, which is also another kind of like, it throws every kind of roadshow exploitation trope into the movie. And it really is kind of like a grab bag of every single kind of like warning about running away from home and doing drugs and having sex and trying to get into the movies and stuff.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I always forget this is 1967 and he's doing a movie with these opening and closing square ups. Nobody's doing square ups anymore.
No. But then this is also the same year that he opened The Gruesome Twosome with the two wigs.
Well, that's because he had to fill space. He undershot his movie.
I'll Die on the Hill. That is still one of my all-time favorites of his. I just love everything about it.
Camp.
It really is. It's pure camp. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's the whole scene at the drive-in. There's so much good Florida footage. There's a lot of girls dancing, eating fried chicken in the dorm room.
I mean, using the term camp, but that movie is camp.
It is very camp, and I love it. It's great. Yeah. But same year as this. But that goes to show you what his focus was mostly on. I'm glad he went with Louise on this though, because I do think it is one of his better made films, and I think the script is a big reason for that. The script and Nancy Lee Noble are a big reason why this works. Still in 2025.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I guess that's our lesson for today. After what you've seen, you certainly don't need a lecture from me.
There's a little round pill in a little round case, and it's all the world to me, because without when you take that pill from its little round case. Take one every day. If you miss one pill, just one little pill, there's the devil to pay. Takes that little round pill, or I'll tell you this, my laddie, instead of calling you lover boy, they're gonna call you daddy. Hail to thee, O man of science, we shall love thee still, 'cause our women have reliance on that friendly little round pill in a little round case. And it means so much to me, because without that little round pill, I'd have a family. Have a family.
Yeah, so we went to Chicago after being in California.
Surprise.
For weeks. We're making our way back east to New York, I think. I don't remember I know what we have next on deck.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description